My name is Isabella Clark, and I'm 35 years old. Until last Thursday, I thought I understood what stability felt like, the gentle rhythm of work dinner laughter and someone's hand finding yours in the dark. Then my phone buzzed during lunch, and that rhythm stopped. I'm leaving you for Allison. She's everything you're not: driven, successful, sophisticated. She can give me the life I deserve. Don't try to contact me. I'll pick up my things this weekend. I read Edward's message 3 times before the words finally registered. 4 years together, 2 years living in my house, and he ended it with a text. The smell of my half-eaten sandwich turned sour. My fingers trembled, but not from shock, from humiliation. He didn't even have the decency to look me in the eye. Edward's new love. Allison Morrison wasn't a stranger. I'd met her once at his firm's holiday gala, the kind of event where everyone smiled too much and drank expensive champagne to prove they belonged. Allison was a partner at the firm, the kind of woman who wore power like perfume. Mid-40s, tailored suits, a smile that could slice glass. She'd introduced herself as Mrs. Morrison. Her husband Elliot had stood beside her, chatting warmly about charity work, while Edward hovered nearby, pouring Allison another glass of wine every chance he got. I remember teasing him afterward. "You practically played bartender for your boss all night." He laughed and said, "She's the key to my promotion, Izzy. You know how this works." I'd believed him. Looking back, I should have noticed the signs. The late nights, the sudden obsession with designer ties, the faint whiff of cologne that wasn't his. But love makes you lazy in the worst way. It tells you that comfort is proof of safety. I guess I was comfortable enough not to question the cracks. I stared at the text for a long minute, then typed 2 words, "Good luck." Then I set the phone down, took a deep breath, and whispered to the empty room, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Because Edward wasn't as clever as he thought. A small, cruel truth warmed me. The iPad I'd given him for his birthday, the one he used for work, for browsing, for reading legal articles, was still synced to my iCloud. Every message he sent appeared on that device. Every photo, every whisper he thought was secret. I opened it. The first notification popped up immediately. Allison. My husband suspects nothing. Soon we'll be free. Edward. I can't wait. You make me feel alive. I didn't blink, just scrolled. 6 months worth of texts. Professional at first, flirty next, explicit by the 3rd week, pictures I didn't want to see, conversations about after Elliot finds out and when my divorce is final. But the message that stopped me cold was from Allison herself. Elliot can never know. I'd lose everything in the divorce, half my partnership, the house, the kids. We have to be careful. So she had no intention of leaving her husband. Edward wasn't running off to a fairy tale ending. He was running straight into a dead end. I leaned back in my chair, heart hammering. He'd called me boring, predictable, safe. He wanted fireworks, he'd said once. Well, I could give him fireworks. I copied every message, every timestamp, every image. Saved them in a folder labeled insurance. As I scrolled, I realized something else. Allison Morrison might have been the one Edward chose, but she wasn't untouchable. She had a family, a husband, and a reputation to protect. The kind of woman who believed she could play with fire without ever smelling the smoke. When I finally closed the iPad, the sun had dipped low behind my office window. The room looked dim, hollow, unfamiliar, like my life had been vacuum-sealed in betrayal. But underneath the ache, something colder stirred clarity. They thought they could humiliate me, quietly slip away into their perfect little affair. But I've always been the quiet type. And quiet people, we take our time before we strike. I poured myself a glass of water, opened my laptop, and typed in a name I remembered from that Christmas party, Elliot Morrison, Morrison and Associates. His company profile loaded instantly. His contact number sat right there under Director of Community Outreach. I stared at the screen, heart steady now. If Allison thought her husband would never know, she'd underestimated the wrong woman. My finger hovered over the call button. Then I smiled, just a small, tired, dangerous smile. Let's see how careful you really were, Allison. That night, sleep refused to come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Edward's hand on Allison's back at that office party, the text thread glowing on the iPad like a confession lit by fire. By 2 a.m., I stopped pretending to rest. I got up, made coffee, and began what I told myself wasn't revenge, just truth. First, I needed to protect myself. Edward wasn't on the lease, but he'd lived with me long enough to claim tenant rights. He'd bragged about how smart he was with legal loopholes, so I called Tanya, my closest friend and a property lawyer. She answered on the second ring, groggy. Izzy, it's 2 a.m. What happened? I think my boyfriend just torched my life over a text, I said flatly. 10 minutes later, Tanya's voice sharpened into professional mode. Okay, document everything. Don't touch his stuff. Wait until he picks it up before changing the locks. And Izzy? Yeah, don't do anything illegal, even if you want to. I hesitated, watching the iPad blink again, with another message from Allison. Tomorrow lunch at the Four Seasons. He still doesn't suspect a thing. Don't worry, I said quietly. Everything I'll do is legal, just not merciful. I spent the morning gathering proof. Screenshots, message logs, photos, timestamps. Every message went into a folder on a private drive. I made backups on 3 different cloud accounts and 1 USB drive hidden inside an old jewelry box. The longer I scrolled, the clearer the pattern became. Allison was using him. Edward wasn't her lover, he was her toy. You make me feel young again, she'd texted. I wish I could show you off, but Elliot's donors would notice. You'll have to be patient, baby. My world's complicated. Her world wasn't complicated, it was calculated. And Edward was too infatuated to see the difference. A single line of text from her stuck with me. Elliot can never know. That was the pressure point. That was where I'd strike. At exactly 10:17 a.m., I dialed the number from the firm's directory. A male voice answered, calm and polished. Good morning, Morrison residents. This is Elliot. My throat tightened. For a moment, I almost hung up. But then I heard Edward's laugh echoing in my memory, the one he used when he lied. Mr. Morrison. I said evenly, I'm sorry to call you like this. My name is Isabella Clark. I think we need to talk about your wife. A long silence followed. I could almost hear him stand up from his desk. What about my wife? She's been involved with my boyfriend, Edward Miller. He works under her at Morrison & Associates. The line went dead quiet. For a heartbeat, I thought he'd hung up. Then, do you have proof? 6 months of it. He exhaled a slow, deliberate sound. Not shock, but recognition. Send it to me. Everything. He gave me a private email address. I sent the entire archived text, photos, timestamps, even the folder title, Insurance. For 10 minutes, I sat in silence, the ticking of my kitchen clock louder than my heartbeat. Then the phone rang again. Ms. Clark. Yes, I've read your files. His voice was steel now. Would you mind answering a few questions? He wasn't crying. He wasn't shouting. He was taking notes. He asked for dates, work events, travel receipts, all things Edward had mentioned in passing. By the end of the call, I realized something. Elliot wasn't a man blindsided by betrayal. He was a man cataloging evidence. When we finished, he paused before hanging up. I'm sorry you were dragged into this. I'm not sorry, I said. At least now we both know who we're dealing with. He chuckled a low, bitter sound. I'll handle this my way. I'd appreciate if you didn't warn either of them. I wasn't planning to. After the call, I sat staring at my reflection in the black mirror of my laptop screen. I didn't look like myself anymore. My eyes were steady, too steady, like someone who'd crossed the line between heartbreak and resolve. The satisfaction wasn't loud. It was quiet, measured, controlled. Somewhere across town, Edward was probably sipping his coffee beside Allison, thinking he'd traded up. They had no idea what was coming. I opened the window and let the cold air wash over me. The city moved beneath me. Cars chatter life, going on. And for the first time since that message, I felt strangely alive. Not happy, not whole, just awake. Because the thing about truth is once you start uncovering it, you can't stop. That evening, Tanya stopped by with 2 cups of takeout coffee and a cautious expression. Izzy, she said, lowering her voice, you're not doing anything crazy, right? I smiled faintly. Define crazy. I mean, revenge usually feels good until it doesn't. I looked down at my phone, a fresh message blinking from Edward. Dinner tonight, I need to talk. The audacity almost made me laugh. I deleted the text and turned to Tanya. No revenge, I said. Just a phone call. She studied me, uncertain. What kind of phone call? The kind that changes everything, I replied. That night, I couldn't help picturing the moment Elliot confronted her. The shock on Allison's face, the panic in Edward's. I imagined their perfect illusion collapsing under the weight of truth. In my mind, it wasn't cruel. It was balance. Before bed, I wrote 1 line in my journal. Something I hadn't done in months. Sometimes justice doesn't need a courtroom. Just a phone and perfect timing. I turned off the lights and finally slept. Friday morning arrived calm and ordinary, the kind of morning that tricks you into thinking life might still be normal. The air smelled like rain, soft and metallic, and for a brief moment I almost believed I could pretend none of it had happened. Then my phone buzzed. "Edward, aren't you even going to fight for me? Edward, you're really just letting me go after 4 years." I stared at the messages while sipping my coffee. Each bubble was a tiny spark, trying to reignite something long burned out. I didn't reply. By noon, he sent another text. "Edward Allison's taking me to lunch at La Mirage, that place you said was too expensive for my birthday." That one made me pause. For a split second, I almost laughed because even now he wanted to prove something. To rub salt into a wound he didn't realize was already cauterized. So I set my phone down, opened my laptop, and got back to work. At 2:07 p.m., my phone rang. Once, twice, then again. 17 missed calls in 5 minutes. The first voicemail was frantic. "Isabella, please pick up." "What did you do?" The next one was almost shouting. "This is your fault. You ruined everything." I didn't answer. Instead, I turned on the radio. The hum of background noise was easier to listen to than his panic. By the third voicemail, his tone had cracked. "She found out Izzy Elliott knows. He showed up at the firm, Allison's." The message cut off in static. I closed my eyes, the corner of my mouth twitching. I had expected fallout, but not this fast. Elliott must have moved the moment he got my email. That evening, Tanya called. "Izzy, turn on the news." Channel 5. The segment was small, buried under headlines about market updates, but it was there. Breaking senior partner at Morrison & Associates suspended pending investigation. The image showed Allison walking briskly through the firm's glass doors, paparazzi flashes reflecting off her dark sunglasses. No Edward in sight, no confidence in her stride. The reporter's voice was detached, clinical. Sources confirm allegations of an inappropriate relationship between partner Allison Morrison and a junior paralegal. The firm has issued a statement emphasizing its commitment to ethical standards. Tanya's voice buzzed through the phone. "You didn't. I just told the truth, I said. You realize what you started, right? This isn't just office gossip. This could end careers." "Good," I whispered. "Then it's working." Later that night, I finally listened to the last voicemail Edward left. His voice was trembling. "She served me in front of everyone." Elliott stormed into the partners' meeting and threw the papers at her desk. I lost my job, Izzy. They're investigating both of us. She's saying I manipulated her." A hollow laugh escaped my throat. Of course she was. Allison was never going to go down quietly. "Please just talk to me," he pleaded. "You're the only person I have left." The irony burned deeper than anger. After everything, every lie, every insult whispered into someone else's pillow, he still thought I'd be there. I hit delete. 2 hours later, another message came in, this time from an unknown number. "Elliott Morrison, it's done." Just those 2 words. No explanation needed. For a long while, I sat by the window staring out at the wet city streets. I pictured the chaos unfolding in that cold, gleaming office. Shocked faces. Whispers Allison, trying to maintain control as her husband read her private messages aloud. Edward, standing in the corner, realizing the world he'd betrayed me for was crumbling in real time. It should have felt satisfying. It did for a heartbeat, but underneath it, something hollow gnawed. The truth was I didn't just lose him. I lost the illusion of what my life had been. The quiet ache of that realization was heavier than I expected. Love, even when poisoned, still leaves a scar when it's cut out. At midnight, Tanya texted again. Elliott's lawyers filed for divorce. Allison suspended. Because in that silence, I realized something. No therapist, no friend, no ex could ever teach me. When the person you love burns your world down, sometimes the only way to heal is to light a match of your own and walk away from the smoke. Saturday morning broke gray and quiet, the kind of weather that feels like a held breath. I woke to the sound of tires crunching on the driveway. Through the blinds, I saw a U-Haul truck and Edward standing outside my gate with his sister Monica. He looked nothing like the man who once spent an hour styling his hair before a dinner date. His shirt was wrinkled, eyes hollow. The arrogance drained clean out of him. For a split second, pity brushed against me like a ghost, then vanished. I'd already packed his belongings the night before, 2 suitcases, a box of random tech gadgets, a few shirts that still smelled faintly of Allison's perfume. Everything sat neatly in the garage, taped and labeled. I unlocked the side door and stepped outside, coffee in hand. Morning, I said coolly. Edward blinked like he hadn't expected me to open the door at all. Izzy, please. Can we talk? No. I pointed to the boxes. Your things are there. Monica can help you load them. Monica frowned, glancing between us. Izzy, can we please not do this on the driveway? He's been through hell. So have I said softly. Edward's voice cracked. You have no idea what Allison did. She lied. She said she'd leave him. She said we'd start over. And you believed her. He stepped closer. I lost everything, Izzy. My job, my reputation. You lost my respect long before that I cut in. Monica's hands trembled as she picked up a box. Come on, both of you. This is ridiculous. People make mistakes. I turned to her eyes steady. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, not sleeping with your boss for 6 months. Edward's jaw tightened. I was lonely. You were always working late, always tired. The slap of my palm against his words was sharper than I intended. Don't rewrite this, I said. Don't you dare make this about me. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of cicadas outside. Monica froze mid-step, staring at us. I walked to the garage and opened a small box I'd set aside. Inside was his old tablet, the iPad that started it all. I held it up between us. Recognize this. He blinked. You went through my messages. No, I said, voice flat. You went through mine. This was still logged into my account. Every lie you typed showed up on my screen. Every time you said I was pathetic. Every time you promised her a life you built with me. Edward went pale. Izzy, please. Monica's face twisted. Wait, you said those things? He didn't answer. The silence between us was like glass, fragile, dangerous, ready to cut anyone who touched it. Monica set the box down slowly. You told me she was controlling, she whispered. That she was cold. You said she ruined you. Edward's throat moved as he swallowed. I didn't mean... She shook her head, tears welling up. You said all that while you were cheating on her. He looked at me desperate now. Izzy, I was stupid, okay? I thought Allison loved me. I let out a short laugh that sounded more like a sigh. You thought you were the exception. Every fool in an affair thinks that. He reached out suddenly, hand brushing my wrist. Please, I just need a chance to explain. I made a mistake. I stepped back. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice, repeatedly. Monica turned away, whispering under her breath, unbelievable. Edward's voice rose, cracking. I have nowhere to go. You have parents, I said. And a moving truck. You'll manage. He stared at me, jaw, trembling eyes, bloodshot and desperate. I loved you. I met his gaze steady, unflinching. No, Edward. You loved what I provided. A stable home. Someone who cooked dinner, paid bills, and told you you'd figure it out. You loved the comfort I gave you, not me. He broke then, shoulders shaking, voice cracking, tears cutting down his face. And I felt nothing. Monica lifted the last box into the truck without a word. When she turned back, her voice was low. I'm sorry, Izzy. I didn't know. I know I said. None of us did. As the truck pulled away, I stood on the porch, coffee now cold in my hands. The driveway looked cleaner than it had in years, empty, but peaceful. Inside, I walked to the bedroom we'd once shared. I'd already repainted it a soft gray, the scent of fresh paint masking the faint ghost of his cologne. For the first time, the space felt like mine. I sat on the edge of the bed, exhaled, and whispered to no one. You wanted a bigger life, Edward. Now you can live with the size of your mistake. Then I picked up my phone, blocked his number, and set it face down on the nightstand. The silence that followed wasn't sad, it was clean, like the final note of a song that had played too long. The week after Edward's boxes left my garage, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Texts from mutual friends, coworkers, even acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years. Hey, is it true I heard Edward got fired? What happened? You okay, Izzy? The story had already escaped into the wild shape-shifting, as gossip always does. By Monday morning, everyone knew the Golden Boy paralegal and his boss had blown up an entire law firm. Elliot Morrison didn't just file for divorce. He detonated it. I learned from Tanya, who'd heard through her legal circle, that he'd hired one of the most ruthless attorneys in the state. He'd walked into the firm's board meeting, divorce papers in hand, and exposed every piece of evidence, the messages, the photos, the hotel receipts. But that wasn't all. He'd also filed a workplace misconduct claim accusing the firm of covering up harassment and favoritism. By the end of the day, Allison's name had been stripped from the company letterhead, her office emptied, her reputation shattered. And Edward, he was escorted out with a cardboard box and a security guard trailing behind him. That night, Tanya came over with takeout and a single bottle of wine. You know, she said, half smiling, if revenge were a sport, you'd be Olympic gold by now. I rolled my eyes. I didn't do this. Didn't you? She teased gently. You lit the fuse. You just didn't need to stick around for the explosion. I wanted to argue but couldn't, because she was right. On Wednesday, Edward's name trended on social media. Not because of me, because Allison's lawyer had released a statement calling their relationship a momentary lapse of judgment. She'd painted herself as a victim of emotional manipulation by a subordinate. The comments section was merciless. Some people sympathized, most didn't. Edward's old coworkers chimed in anonymously. He was arrogant, thought he was untouchable. He bragged about her constantly. He tried to defend himself online, told everyone he was in love, that I'd ruined his life out of jealousy. At first I ignored it, but when one of his cousins posted a rant calling me vindictive and cruel, I decided to answer without words. 3 screenshots, that's all it took. Edward to Allison. Izzy's such a safety net. I can't wait until we're done hiding. Edward to a friend. She's paying the bills while I figure out my future. Allison to Edward. You're cute when you think you're in control. I posted them quietly. No caption, no explanation. Within an hour, the post disappeared, and so did the cousin's account. That night, my inbox filled with messages from people who'd once doubted me. Some apologized. Others wanted the juicy details. I ignored them all. Tanya called again. Izzy, everyone's talking about it, she said. You could go viral if you told your side. I laughed softly. I don't need an audience. I just need peace. She hesitated. You're not tempted? No, I said. They destroyed themselves. Why would I ruin the ending? Days passed. Then one afternoon, an unfamiliar car pulled up outside my house. I watched from the kitchen window as Elliot Morrison stepped out. He looked composed, clean suit, calm expression, grief pressed into a kind of quiet dignity. He didn't knock right away, just stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, studying the front garden like he'd been there before. When he finally rang the bell, I opened the door halfway. Mr. Morrison. Elliot, he corrected gently. May I? We sat at the dining table, 2 strangers bound by betrayal. He thanked me again for sending the evidence. You gave me back my clarity, he said. I told him I hadn't done it for him or even for myself. I just wanted the truth to breathe, I said. He smiled faintly. Then I suppose we're both free now. He told me Allison had tried to reach him, begged, pleaded, promised therapy and change. He didn't respond. She's good at apologies, he said, just not at change. Before he left, he paused by the door. Rebuilding is strange, isn't it? You think the silence after betrayal will break you, but eventually it becomes peace. His words lingered long after the door closed. By the weekend, the dust had finally settled. Edward had vanished from social media. Allison's name stopped appearing in the news cycle. People moved on, everyone except them. Tanya said Edward was applying to small firms, none willing to hire him. Allison had fled the city, possibly to start over. And me, I started therapy. It wasn't about moving on from Edward, it was about understanding why I'd stayed so long, why I'd excused so many small betrayals before the final one. My therapist said something that stuck with me. People who love quietly also hurt quietly. That's why no one notices when they start to disappear. So I stopped disappearing. I repainted my house, changed the locks, bought new furniture, picked up woodworking again, something I'd abandoned, because Edward once said, why waste time on hobby projects that won't make money? The first thing I built was a jewelry box, smooth, simple, lined with blue velvet. I didn't keep jewels in it, just the USB drive of evidence. A reminder of what happens when you trust the wrong person too long. One night I sat on my porch watching the sunset bleed into the horizon. The air smelled of sawdust and freedom. I thought about Edward, wherever he was, probably trying to charm someone new, telling another story where he was the victim. And I thought about Allison sitting alone in some luxury apartment, wondering how her empire had collapsed so fast. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, just relief. Some ruins aren't meant to be rebuilt. Some are meant to stay as warnings. I took a slow sip of wine and whispered to the evening air. You built your own downfall. I just made sure everyone could see it. 2 months later, the chaos had quieted, at least on the outside. Inside, I was still rebuilding piece by piece, like furniture you have to sand down before painting again. Therapy helped. So did silence. People kept asking if I'd moved on. I never knew what that meant. Moving on sounded like running away. What I was doing wasn't running. It was staying still long enough to heal. Edward tried to reach me again. New numbers. Fake social media accounts. One email came from an address called New Beginnings 2025. He attached an old photo of us from 3 summers ago, me in a sundress, him smiling, arm around my shoulders. Underneath, just 5 words. This was real, Izzy. Please. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe in some way he believed it was real. But what's real to a liar? A feeling. A moment. A performance. I typed, nothing, just dragged the email into spam, then deleted it again for good measure. One afternoon, my doorbell rang. I expected a delivery. Instead, it was Mrs. Miller Edward's mother. She looked smaller than I remembered her posture, bending under the weight of something heavier than age. Please, she said, tears in her eyes. He's not himself. He lost everything. He just got confused. I kept my voice gentle but firm. He got caught. There's a difference. She nodded, lips trembling. I know. I just hoped I cut her off softly. Every day with me was a second chance. He chose not to take any of them. She whispered a quiet, "I'm sorry," and walked back to her car. I watched her go, my chest aching not for Edward, but for the version of me who once would have opened the door wider. Elliot and I kept in touch. Not romantically, just two people who'd both looked into the same abyss and walked away. We met for coffee once a month. He'd talk about his new nonprofit one that offered free legal guidance to spouses blindsided by infidelity. Ironic, isn't it? He'd laugh. Allison's lies built the foundation for something good. Sometimes we'd sit in silence, watching the world move around us. No flirting, no tension. Just shared understanding. He once said, "You know, they didn't just cheat on us. They cheated themselves out of good lives with good people." I nodded, because I finally believed it. Meanwhile, the gossip cycle turned over. Allison and Edward faded into obscurity. Rumors said she'd left the state. Edward was working at some document review job that barely paid rent. Tanya sent me an article one day. Former law partner faces tax evasion investigation. Underneath the headline was Allison's old photo, her confident smile, now a relic of the past. I didn't feel triumph, just closure. The kind of quiet satisfaction that comes when a storm finally exhausts itself. My house became my sanctuary again. I filled the walls with soft, light music and the hum of my woodworking tools. The scent of fresh pine became the smell of recovery. One evening, I stood in that same workshop running my fingers over the edge of a new project, a small wooden box. Not a jewelry box this time, a memory box. Inside, I placed 3 things. A folded note from my therapist that said, "Progress is quiet." One photo of me smiling, not with Edward, just me at the beach alone. And a single key, the spare house key he'd left behind. I locked the box and wrote across the lid with a marker free. I don't believe in perfect endings anymore. I believe in peaceful ones. And peace isn't loud or cinematic. It's a quiet morning where you make coffee without flinching at the thought of someone else's voice in the kitchen. It's the moment you realize you're okay with being alone, because alone no longer means empty. The last message I got from Edward was short. "You destroyed my life." I didn't reply, but I whispered to the empty room. "No, Edward. You built your life on lies. I just turned on the light." That night, I went for a walk along the river. The city lights rippled across the water, soft and gold, like the world was finally forgiving itself for being cruel. I took a deep breath and let it fill me. Not victory,